The council chamber fell silent as High Scholar Vextan activated the holographic display. Representatives from 37 different species sat in their designated seats, each one staring at the rotating blue planet that appeared in the center of the room. Earth, the newest addition to the Galactic Union, and by far the most troubling. Vextan cleared his throat, a sound that resembled stones grinding together. His gray skin stretched tight over angular bones as he prepared to deliver news that would change everything the galaxy believed about the young species called humans. Distinguished representatives, he began, his voice carrying the weight of 200 years of archaeological research. What I am about to show you comes from a recent excavation on Earth. Our teams were granted access to study human history, as is standard procedure for all new Union members. What we found was not standard at all. Ambassador Kiranash from the Velothian Consortium leaned forward in her seat. Her people had been the ones to make first contact with humanity. They had discovered the humans 50 years ago, finding them already established in their own solar system, with colonies on their moon and the red planet they called Mars. The Velothians had assumed humans were a typical developing species, perhaps 1,000 years away from becoming a significant presence in galactic affairs. That assumption was about to be destroyed. Vextan pressed a control, and the image of Earth zoomed in on a specific location, a desert region. The hologram showed what appeared to be ancient ruins buried beneath layers of sand and rock. This site dates back approximately 80 of Earth's years, Vextan explained. Our dating methods are extremely precise. The humans call this location Nevada, part of a nation-state that existed before their current unified government. The representatives watched as the hologram showed the excavation process. Alien archaeologists carefully brushing away dirt from massive concrete structures. Underground bunkers that extended deep into the planet's crust. Storage facilities filled with documentation that had been preserved by the dry desert conditions. What you are seeing, Vextan continued, is one of several sites we discovered across the planet. The humans knew about these locations, but had restricted access to them for what they called national security reasons. When we requested permission to excavate, they agreed without hesitation. I believe they wanted us to find what was buried there. Representative Gornax of the militant hegemony made a sound of impatience. His species was known for their military prowess, and they had little interest in archaeological findings, unless those findings related to warfare. Get to the point, scholar. What did you find? Vextan looked directly at Gornax. The scholar had spent his entire life studying dead civilizations, and he had learned one important truth. The most dangerous species were not the ones who developed weapons after achieving peace. The most dangerous species were the ones who developed weapons out of fear of themselves. We found evidence, Vextan said slowly, that humans developed weapons capable of sterilizing entire planets before they achieved spaceflight. Before they even left their own atmosphere, the chamber erupted in chaos. Gornax was on his feet immediately, his massive frame towering over the other representatives. Impossible. No species develops planetary-scale weapons before space travel. It goes against every model of technological development we have observed. Ambassador Kiranash had gone pale, the blue tint of her skin fading to an almost white color. Her people had welcomed humans into the Union. They had vouched for them. They had assured the Council that humans were a peaceful species with no significant military capability beyond basic defense systems. Vextan waited for the noise to subside before continuing. He changed the hologram to show a series of documents, diagrams, mathematical equations, test results. The weapons were called nuclear devices, he explained. They function through atomic fission and fusion, releasing energy equivalent to millions of tons of their primitive explosive compounds. A single device could destroy an entire city. The largest devices they built could devastate areas spanning hundreds of kilometers. He paused, letting the information sink in. The humans built thousands of these weapons. Tens of thousands. They pointed them at each other, ready to launch at a moment's notice. Their entire species lived under the constant threat of mutual annihilation for decades. They called this period the Cold War. Representative Yeloth of the pacifist collective looked like she might collapse. Her species had achieved space travel through cooperation and unity. They had never experienced true warfare. The concept of a species threatening to destroy itself was beyond her comprehension. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would any species do this to themselves?" Vextan brought up new images. Maps showing the planet divided into competing factions. Historical records of wars and conflicts. Documentation of political ideologies that turned nations against each other. Humans did not evolve as a unified species, he explained. They developed in separate groups across their planet. These groups competed for resources, territory, and ideological dominance. When their technology advanced to the point where total destruction became possible, they did not step back from the edge. They walked right up to it and stared into the abyss. Gornax had returned to his seat, but his expression had changed. The military commander was no longer dismissive. He was calculating. His species had fought countless wars across the galaxy, but they had always done so with the understanding that certain lines should not be crossed. Planetary weapons were developed only after a species matured, only after they had learned restraint through interstellar contact with other civilizations. Humans had developed these weapons while completely alone in the universe. "Show us the devices," Gornax demanded. "Show us exactly what they built." Vextan complied. The hologram displayed the excavated remains of a nuclear warhead. The metal casing had corroded over the decades, but the internal components were still intact. Alien scientists had carefully disassembled it, documenting every piece. This particular device was designed to be carried by a primitive rocket, Vextan explained. The rocket could travel between continents in less than half of an Earth hour. The humans built submarines that could launch these rockets while hidden beneath their oceans. They built aircraft that could drop the devices from high altitude. They created systems designed to launch automatically if certain conditions were met, removing human decision-making from the equation entirely. The implications hung heavy in the air. A species that had automated their own potential extinction. A species that had trusted machines to decide whether billions would live or die. Ambassador Kiranash finally found her voice, but they stopped. They reduced their arsenals. They chose not to use these weapons against each other. "That is correct," Vextan acknowledged. On multiple occasions, humans came within minutes of launching these weapons. Technical malfunctions, miscommunications, and political tensions brought them to the brink of annihilation repeatedly. And each time, something held them back. Sometimes it was a single individual who refused to follow orders. Sometimes it was pure luck. But yes, they survived. They chose restraint. He changed the hologram one final time. This image showed a modern human city. Towering structures of glass and metal. Flying vehicles moving through organized airways. Children playing in parks while their parents watched from nearby benches. The humans dismantled most of their nuclear arsenals decades before we made contact, Vextan said. They buried the evidence, hoping to forget what they had almost done to themselves. When we asked to excavate those sites, they did not resist. They wanted us to know. They wanted us to understand. Gornax spoke again, his voice surprisingly quiet. "Understand what, scholar?" Vextan turned to face the military commander directly. That humans are not a young species finding their way in the galaxy. They are survivors. They faced extinction by their own hands and chose to live instead. Every other species we have encountered developed weapons of mass destruction only after they had achieved interstellar travel, only after they had learned that other civilizations existed and might pose a threat. Humans developed these weapons while believing they were completely alone in an empty universe. They pointed their guns at each other because there was no one else to point them at. The scholar let that statement settle over the chamber before continuing. The question we must ask ourselves is this: what kind of species develops the ability to destroy their own world before they even know if other worlds exist? What kind of species chooses to step back from that destruction without any external reason to do so? And perhaps most importantly, what kind of species are they capable of becoming now that they know they are not alone? The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then Representative Yeeloth spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. They are not children. They have never been children. They are simply new to us. Ambassador Kira Nash nodded slowly. She had spent years building relationships with human diplomats, believing she was guiding a young species toward galactic citizenship. Now she realized the truth. The humans had never needed guidance. They had needed observation. They had needed to be understood. And perhaps, she thought with a chill running through her body, they had needed to be watched very carefully. Gornak stood once more, but this time there was no hostility in his posture. There was something else entirely, something that looked almost like respect. I move that the militant hegemony increase diplomatic ties with the human species, he announced. And I suggest that every member of this council do the same. These beings walked through fire before they ever left their homeworld. They carried the weight of their own destruction and chose to put it down. Whatever challenges the galaxy faces in the coming centuries, I want humanity standing beside us when we face them. The vote was unanimous. 3 months later, the first human ambassador took her seat in the council chamber. She was young by galactic standards, barely 40 Earth years old. But she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who understood exactly where her species had been and where they were going. When asked about the archaeological discoveries, she simply smiled. We always knew you would find out eventually, she said. We wanted you to understand something important about us. We are not a species that fears destruction. We have lived with it our entire existence. What we fear is stagnation. What we fear is standing still while the universe moves on without us. We built those weapons because we were afraid of each other. We put them down because we realized we should be afraid of something much bigger. She gestured toward the stars visible through the chamber's transparent ceiling. The universe is vast and old, and full of dangers we have not yet discovered. When those dangers come, and they will come, you will want allies who have already proven they can survive the worst. You will want allies who chose life when death was easier. You will want us. No one in the chamber disagreed. The humans had arrived in the galactic community carrying a history of near self-destruction. But that history was not a weakness. It was proof of something far more important. It was proof that humanity could face the unthinkable and choose to be better. It was proof that they could change. And in a universe where extinction waited around every corner, that ability to change might be the most valuable trait any species could possess. The galaxy had welcomed humanity with cautious optimism. Now, with the truth revealed, that optimism transformed into something deeper, something that felt almost like hope. Hope that when the real test came, humanity would stand firm. Hope that the species who had once held their own destruction in their hands would use those same hands to protect something greater than themselves. Hope that the survivors would help everyone else survive as well. The archaeological discovery had proven one thing beyond any doubt. Humanity was not just another species reaching for the stars. They were a species that had already wrestled with darkness and won. And that made all the difference.